Hi, welcome back. And first of all, apologies for the scruffy appearance. I'm gardening, doing emails, and I thought I'd just quickly do this video in between all the other stuff. And apologies for the lighting. The sun's going in and out about every 15 seconds. Right, today's video is about the Z6iii, which I've had now for a few days. And I'm going to give my thoughts on that, why I've got it, what I'm going to use it for, how it compares to the other cameras, which we're going to talk about today, which is the Leica M10, the Zf, the Z6iii. So a bit of a ramble, as always, but hopefully you'll find some of my thoughts, observations and so on possibly useful. So let me kick off quickly with the Z6iii, which I've had for a long time now. It's always had the problem of focusing. The AF on the Z6iii is, to be honest, pretty pants. My D780 is streets ahead. And in fact, probably my 15-year-old D700 isn't far behind either. So it's really not particularly great. But for weddings, it's good enough. If you know, if you use the right focus mode and just accept that it's, you know, not totally brilliant, then you still end up with some pretty decent photos. And the sensor and the colours and the noise and all that is absolutely brilliant. So all the other bits, most of the other bits, are pretty good on the Z6iii. Not to say that they can't be improved. The Leica M10, I got this, where we're now, about 7 or 8 months ago now, I suppose, because I finally felt I'd sort of got to the point as a photographer when I was good enough to have a Leica. I wanted it just really for my personal work, for street photography, for the other stuff I do that isn't paid. And yeah, I absolutely love it. If you've never had a Leica, if you get the chance to get one, if all you do is put it on your shelf and look at it, it's still going to be worth it. Believe me, it is absolutely gorgeous. The shutter. I mean, I've got no other camera that sounds like it, that feels like it. And yeah, I still love it, and I can see me having this for the rest of my life. But after probably 4 months, 5 months of persevering with the focusing, I have to confess I'm not as good as I would like to be with the rangefinder manual focusing. I find many situations when it's really difficult. You've got this patch that you've got to line up with the main photo. I find it very difficult sometimes if you're trying to focus on, let's say, trees or flowers or anything, foliage or anything that's got lots of sort of stuff in it. It can get really difficult trying to decide which bit of this is got to line up with what bit of that. If you've got people, if they're a little way away, that's not too difficult, but if you've got to focus on someone's eye, I mean, several times I've lined up this eye with that eye, and it's just not, for me, I don't find it particularly easy. The images aren't that good. Now I'm over the kind of honeymoon period with it and can be more objective. The Leica images are not as good as, probably not even as good as the Z6iii or the D780 in terms of dynamic range, noise, and in fact even the colours from Nikon. People say Leica colours are you know, the best there are. Well, what's best? Most realistic, most artistic, most, I don't know, most vibrant, I'm not sure. But obviously the Leica is very much affected by what lens you put on it, but even so, it no longer holds that magic that this is from a Leica, so it must be better. So that's been kind of retired. Definitely not sold, but retired, because I got the Zf as a replacement. Yeah, a replacement for the Leica to do the same sort of work. So street photography, my personal work, so on and so forth. About 2 weeks, a week after I got it, I realised that just how good this is. The Zf is an absolute marvel. I'd debated whether to get this or the Z6iii, which had just come out at that point. I'm going back few months now, and decided on the ZF because there were people who had just got the Z6iii and were saying the dynamic range wasn't as good, it was a bit noise, the noise wasn't as good, blah blah blah, and that the focusing on the Z6iii was no better than the ZF anyway. So I got this. I thought I liked the retro feel, the look, and so on and so forth. Bit of a novelty. As I say, very soon after I got it, I took it to a wedding, and the focusing was so much better than the Z6 II. It's been actually my main wedding camera ever since, so from like midsummer through to now. But as a wedding camera, it has many shortfalls. The main one being the usability. There's very few buttons you can program. You've got one button down here, you've got a record button there, and that's pretty much it really. Which for a wedding does make life a little more difficult from the focusing point of view, and also, I mean, it hasn't even got a U1, U2 and U3 setting where you can set the camera up. I mean, normally I've got my Z6 II set up so that U3 is flash, U2 is kind of action photography, so I've got the shutter set to 2,000ths of a second, just flick to U2, and I know that if I want to capture the bride throwing the bouquet, it's all going to be set up for me. This doesn't have that, so it is more difficult to use. For personal work, brilliant. And as a replacement for the Leica, yeah, well, it's got a Leica lens on, and the other lenses I've got work brilliantly on this because the manual focusing on this is superb. Mention more about that when I talk about the Z6iii in a moment. But yeah, I mean, the fancy dials, to be honest, I've never moved them off of, what is it, third of a step for the speed and C for the ISO. I just don't play with them. So it's nice, it's lovely, but it's still a bit of a novelty. But as my personal camera, that's fine. I decided a couple of weeks ago that for the rest of this year and for next year, I really wanted to improve on the ZF from its usability point of view for weddings, hence the Z6iii. I didn't quite know what I was getting into because there's so much conflicting thoughts and comments about this camera. So let me give you my initial reactions. I haven't even done a wedding with it. I've been out for a couple of hours and taken some photos with it, and obviously it's quite similar to the Z6 II, and in fact almost every other Nikon. We have U1, U2, U3. Brilliant, I love it. It's got the programmability that the Z8 has. I had the Z8 for a few months last year. So I've got 3 different focus settings. I can use the display button is my wide area, and that will just, you know, photograph anything that comes into the scene. So if I'm photographing a bride appearing out of nowhere and I don't know quite where she's going to appear, that's perfect, because the moment she appears, it'll pick up on the bride or the groom, whatever. Or if you were doing sport or something like that and you want to get, I don't know, a motorbike coming around a corner or something and you're not quite sure where it's going to be, or scrambling or something like that, that would be brilliant. So I've got one button set up for that. My normal back button focus is 3D tracking with people subject detection turned on, so face and eye autofocus. Most of the time when you just point this at someone, in fact if I just point this at my picture on the wall there, just to make sure, yeah, I just point it and it picks up the eye immediately, and therefore when I press the button, back button focus, it's going to focus on that. 3D tracking is therefore going to, whatever I do with the camera, whatever the subject does, it's going to follow, and it really is good. I think it's probably a bit better than the ZF. I haven't been to weddings, as I say, but for my tests side by side, I would say AF on this is a tiny bit better. I also believe, I read, that this is better in low light photography. I have found the ZF doesn't struggle exactly on the first dance getting focus, but I have noticed, you know, first dance shots, they're not all dead sharp in focus. not because it's focused on something else, it's just kind of blurry. They're just not, I don't know, it's just not focused on anything. The Z6 II, I don't know, it's probably, from that point of view, if I use single point AF on both cameras, on the ZF and the Z6 II, on first dance, I'll probably get slightly better results actually on the Z6 II. So whilst I complain about the AF, it's really only down to the tracking and the sort of subject recognition that I would complain about. Yeah, and the one of the function buttons here I've got programmed to spot single point focus. So if suddenly I want to focus on the rings, or more a better example, bride standing there, bride and groom standing there, and she's got a hand here or something like that, and I don't want to focus on her face or her eye, I want to focus on her ring. Sorry, her ring. And the camera won't do it, so I've got a button set up so I can just do that, single point, get that done. So it's absolutely brilliant for weddings, absolutely. Plus it's 24 megapixels, not 45 like the Z8 was, which I found I didn't want. I would have preferred the Z8 to be 24 megapixels. I know I'm different to most people, but I see that as a good thing sometimes. I love the flippy screen. You either love the flippy screen or you hate the flippy screen. I find it so useful to get above, to get below, but also for doing low down kind of portrait shots like this, where I'm just an inch or two off the floor looking up. It's absolutely brilliant. I also love the fact that I can shut it up and I've got no screen on the back. I'm not distracted by anything popping up on the back. I don't have my nose moving the focus point or anything crazy like that. Much more sort of DSLR type experience of shooting with it like that. I love it. And then frames per second and all that is way more than I would ever need for a wedding. So yeah, I love it. And also I use manual exposure. I've come to use manual exposure a lot more this year, and I've been working towards that, and probably now at weddings at least 80% of the shots I'm on manual. With auto ISO, but I can change the speed, so if I'm in a dark church I'll take a bit of a risk and come down to sort of 60th or an 80th of a second. I don't like shooting that slowly, but providing the bride and groom are just standing there or something, I can shoot at that. When they walk up the aisle, I can just whack it up to 200 and okay, we're going to be at 25,000 ISO. I've got control, whereas if I'm on aperture priority, I don't have that control. So I do like manual exposure with auto ISO, which by the way I've also reassigned from the ISO button on the top to the other function button. I find it really difficult to press that ISO button and use the front dial to change from auto to not auto, and also the back dial. It's all sort of a bit, whereas if I'm using the function button, it's very much easier to get to the front dial, and it doesn't affect using the back dial at all. So I've changed the ISO down to one of those, which you can't do on the Z6 II, and you can't, sorry, you can do that. And that's what I've done on the Zf, which again is a brilliant camera if you want to use manual exposure. The rear screen, sorry, no, the EVF is the highest resolution that Nikon have ever done, more than the Z8 or the Z9, 5.76 million dots. Well, yeah, it's lovely, but I have to say, I couldn't really say one or the other. I haven't got this turned on to the higher frame rate. It's going to eat through batteries quicker, and it's plenty good enough as it comes in the box. It's absolutely fine. So I see the Z6 III as a mini Z8, which is, I know from experience, is a mini Z9. As I said earlier, I've got to love, I didn't when it first happened, but I've got to love cameras of this size rather than DSLR size. So the Z6 III just seems to tick all the boxes. I've experimented with a few shots in the dark. Actually, yes, pretty much in the dark. A room at night time, no lights on, just my phone. Where's it gone? It's there. My phone torch pointing at a wall, and I'm taking, so the phone's pointing at that wall and I take a picture over on this wall. So it's really pretty dark. Cameras on 16,000 ISO, 20,000 ISO, something like that. And I've done that with both the the Zf and the Z6iii. Compare them side by side, and I'm not going to bore you with going over through the photos. The Z6iii might have just a smidgen more noise. It really is a smidgen, and with one click in Lightroom, it's not a problem. So the people that were sort of putting you off buying the Z6iii months ago by saying, oh, it's a lot more noise, and no, in reality, as with many of these things, it is really so insignificant you wouldn't notice it. So that's where I am now. So my wedding gear is Z6 II and Z6 III. My street photography and personal work is Zf. By the way, I think I mentioned, I did a video about the Zf a while ago, and I was super impressed with the colours. More so than the Z6 II. I felt they'd done something to the Zf to make the skin tones even more realistic, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And I was afraid that maybe on the Z6 III I was going to lose that. It's marginal, you know. We're talking the last 1 or 2%. It really, you know, if the Z6 III was the same image quality as the Z6 II, it really wouldn't worry me too much. It's not the end of the world. But again, from what I've done so far, side by side comparison with the Zf and the Z6 III, the colours look identical. I can't see any difference whatsoever in the colours. So the fact it's a semi-stacked sensor, whatever that might mean, doesn't seem to have degraded the colours that you get from the Nikon cameras. So that's where we are now. I hope you found that useful. Got any questions, please let me know. If you would like a video or other, or got some ideas for videos, let me know. Thanks for watching.